The text came in at 7:42 on a Tuesday while I was still in scrubs, leaning against the wall outside OR4 with cold coffee going colder in my hand. It was from my cousin, the one who never texted me unless someone had died or someone had been born. The message said, "Are you okay? I've been thinking about you all weekend." I stared at it for a long time. I had no idea what she meant. The weekend had been a blur of a 16-hour shift Saturday, a frozen lasagna I ate standing up Sunday afternoon, and a phone call with a patient's husband that left me crying in my car in the parking garage. That was my weekend. Nothing for anyone to be sorry about. I wrote back, "I'm fine." Why? The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 3 times. That was the part that scared me. When someone is choosing their words that carefully, the words are going to hurt. Finally, she sent, "Did your dad really not invite you to your brother's engagement party?" I read it twice. Then I read it 3 more times. Then I felt my back slide down the wall until I was crouched on the linoleum in the hallway where everyone could see me, and I just stayed there with the phone in my lap and my pager digging into my hip and the cold coffee soaking into my shoe. My brother wasn't engaged. My brother was a lot of things. But the last time I had spoken to him 2 months ago at our mother's birthday dinner, he had been very loudly single and very loudly complaining about it. There had been no engagement. There had been no engagement. There had been nothing. I typed back, "What engagement party?" She didn't answer for almost a minute. Then she sent a screenshot. It was an Instagram post from my aunt, my dad's older sister, who I had not seen in maybe 4 years. The photo was of a long table set in someone's backyard, fairy lights strung overhead, a banner that said, "Congratulations" in cursive. My brother was at the head of the table with his arm around a blonde woman I had never seen before. My father was next to them, smiling in a way I almost didn't recognize, because I had never been the one to make him smile like that. My mother was at the other end, holding a champagne flute up like she was toasting the photographer. The caption said, "Family is everything. So proud of our boy." The date stamp was 2 days earlier, Sunday. While I had been eating my lasagna, I want to tell you that I cried right there in the hallway. I didn't. I have done this job for 7 years, and the first thing they teach you in residency is that your face has to be steady when other people are coming apart. I sat there on the floor and I felt my face go still the way it goes still when a patient codes, and then I stood up. And I went back into the OR, and I scrubbed in for a 4-hour procedure on a 63-year-old man with a leaking mitral valve. I closed his chest at midnight. I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for 45 minutes before I went inside. That was when I cried. In the car, with the engine off and the dome light on, and my hands shaking on the steering wheel the way they had never shaken inside the OR. My fiancé was already asleep when I came in. I should tell you about him because he matters, but I don't want to tell you yet because for the longest time, I kept him to myself the same way you keep a candle cupped in your hands when you're walking down a dark hallway. If I let too much air at him, I was afraid my family would blow him out. His name doesn't matter for this part. The part that matters is that I sat on the edge of our bed in the dark, and I looked at the ring on my left hand, the ring I had been wearing for 9 months now, the ring my mother had never noticed because she had never once asked to see my hands. And I thought, they didn't even invite me to my own brother's engagement. And then I thought, they didn't even tell me he was engaged. In the morning I called my mother. I want to say I planned it. I didn't. I had 4 hours of sleep, and I called her on my drive to the hospital because my hands needed something to do that wasn't gripping the wheel. She picked up on the second ring. Voice bright. "Sweetheart, what a surprise. Why didn't you tell me my brother was getting married?" There was a pause, a small one, just long enough that I knew she had been waiting for this call, just long enough that I knew she had prepared. "Oh, honey," she said. "Don't be like that. It was a small thing. Just family. I am family. You know what I mean. Close family. The people who are around. You're so busy, you wouldn't have been able to come anyway. We didn't want to put you in an awkward position." I drove 3 blocks in silence. She did not fill the silence. She had learned over 31 years that I would always be the one to fill the silence first. Mom, I said finally, I work 15 minutes from your house. You know what I mean? I really don't. She sighed, the long, suffering sigh, the one that meant I was being difficult again. Your brother and his fiancée wanted a calm evening. You can be a lot sometimes. At family things. We just thought it would be easier. There it was. I had been waiting for it my whole life, and I had never quite heard her say it that plainly. You can be a lot. We thought it would be easier. Easier without me. Easier if I wasn't there. The word easier did something to my chest that I want to describe accurately because I think a lot of people will know this feeling. It was like the wind getting knocked out of you. Except the wind had been knocked out of you so many times before that you had learned to keep walking through it without anyone noticing. I pulled into the doctor's lot. I put the car in park. I said, very calmly, then don't expect to be at mine. She laughed. She actually laughed. Honey, please, don't be dramatic this early in the morning. I hung up. I sat in the car for another 10 minutes, and then I went inside and I performed a triple bypass on a man who, when he woke up, would call me an angel and cry and try to hold my hand. That is the strange thing about my job. The world tells you whether you matter through such different mouths. That afternoon, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message in the voice he uses for board meetings, the voice that has no warmth in it and never has. Even when I was 7 and brought home a perfect spelling test, and he glanced at it and said good, and went back to the paper. The voicemail said, "Your mother is upset. You owe her an apology. We did what was best for your brother. He's the one getting married. This isn't about you, and frankly, the fact that you've made it about you proves our point. Call me back when you've calmed down." I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. That night, I told my fiancé everything. We were eating takeout pho at the kitchen island, and I had not meant to start crying again, but somewhere around the part where I told him my father had said, "This isn't about you," the broth in my spoon started to ripple because my hand was shaking, and he reached across the counter and took the spoon out of my hand and set it down and just held my wrist for a second. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I don't even know her name." His fiancée. I don't know her name. Okay. How do I not know her name? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me something. If your family had called you yesterday and said, 'We want you to be at the wedding,' would you go?" I opened my mouth to say yes. Of course, yes. They were my family. But I couldn't make the word come out. He saw it on my face. He didn't push. He just said, "Then maybe the question isn't whether they invite you. Maybe the question is what you want from them." I want to tell you about him properly now. We met in the basement of the hospital library 4 years ago. He was doing a postdoc in molecular neuroscience and I was hiding from my pager. I was reading a journal article upside down because I had been staring at it for 40 minutes without seeing any of the words, and he sat down across from me and said, very seriously, "I think that paper makes more sense the other way." I looked at him. He looked at me. I started laughing in a way I hadn't laughed in months, and the librarian came over and asked us to leave. He proposed in our kitchen on a Tuesday. No knee, no candles, no photographer in the bushes. He was scrambling eggs. He turned around, spatula in hand, eggs sliding off it, and said, "Hey, I want to do this with you forever. Is that okay?" The ring was in the pocket of his pajama pants. I said yes with eggs on the floor. I had not told my family. I had been engaged for 9 months and I had not told them because every time I thought about telling them I imagined my mother's first question, "What does he do?" and my father's second question, "What does his father do?" and my brother's joke that I'd had to settle for a science nerd because no one else would have me. I had imagined it so many times that the engagement had started to feel like a small, private thing that lived only between us. glowing in our kitchen and our bedroom and the cheap booth at the pho place where we ate every Tuesday. But that night, the night after the phone call, I looked at him across the noodles and I thought, I have been protecting them from my own happiness for years. I am done, I said. Let's set a date. He smiled. Yeah, when? Soon? How soon? 3 months. He blinked. 3. Okay, yeah, 3 months. I'm in. Where? Somewhere they're not. He laughed and then he saw I wasn't joking and he stopped laughing and he reached for my hand. The thing nobody tells you about cutting off your family is that your family doesn't go quietly. They become very loud. They become loud in ways that make you doubt yourself, because the version of you in their voicemails is a person you've never met. A selfish person, a dramatic person, a person who has always made things about herself, a person who is now, in her 30s, finally showing her true ugly nature. You start to wonder if they know you better than you know yourself. For 3 weeks, the calls came. My mother's voice cracking on voicemails about how her heart was breaking. My father's voice tightening on voicemails about reputation, about what the neighbors would say, about the upcoming wedding and how I was jeopardizing it. My brother left exactly one voicemail. It said, "Grow up." That was the whole message. I did not call back. I did not text back. I went to work, and I came home and I started planning a wedding. Not their version of a wedding. Mine. We chose a small lodge in the Berkshires, about 3 hours from the hospital, owned by a woman who made her own lavender soap and didn't care about anything except whether you'd be kind to her dogs. We invited 42 people. My grandmother on my mother's side, who had always been the only one who really looked at me. My fiancé's parents and his sister. 3 of my residents who had become like siblings to me during the worst years of my training. My cousin, the one who had sent the text. My best friend from medical school and her husband and their toddler, who would be the world's worst flower girl. The woman who taught me cello when I was 12 and who, when I quit at 16 because my mother said it was a waste of time, had sent me a card every Christmas for 19 years. Nobody from my father's side of the family, nobody from my mother's side except my grandmother, nobody named on my birth certificate as a parent. I want to tell you what happened next. Because this is where it stops being a story about pain and starts being a story about something else. And I'm still not sure what to call it. Justice, maybe, but that word is too clean for what it felt like. About 6 weeks before my wedding, a colleague of mine, a cardiologist I had trained under, who had become something between a mentor and a second father, was given a Lifetime Achievement Award by the New England Medical Association. He asked me to speak at the dinner. I said yes. I wrote a speech about him for 2 weeks. I cried writing parts of it. The dinner was at a hotel in Boston. Black tie. 200 people. A lot of cameras. My fiancé came with me. I wore a deep green dress that my best friend had made me buy. I gave my speech, and at the end of it the room stood up and clapped for a long time, and my mentor came up to the podium and hugged me. And someone took a photograph of that hug that ended up on the cover of the regional medical journal the following month. In the photograph, you could see my hand on his shoulder. You could see the ring on my hand. You could see it very clearly. The week the journal came out, my mother called 14 times. I did not pick up. On the 15th call, she left a voicemail that started, "Sweetheart, what is that on your hand?" and continued for 4.5 minutes in a tone I had never heard her use before. It was not the long-suffering tone. It was not the wounded tone. It was something underneath both of those tones, a tone she had probably hoped I would never hear, the tone of someone who has just realized she has miscalculated. My father called twice that week. The first call I let go to voicemail. "Are you engaged?" the voicemail said. "To whom? Why has no one told us about this? Call me back today." The second call I picked up. I don't know why. Some part of me, the part that was still 7 years old and had spelled every word right on the test, wanted him to ask me one good question. He did not ask me a good question. He said, "Your mother is in tears. You owe us an explanation." For what? For whatever stunt you're pulling. Are you actually engaged? Or is this for show? I almost laughed. For show? For whose show, Dad? Who exactly do you think I'm performing for? Don't be smart with me. I'm engaged. I've been engaged for almost a year. You didn't know because you didn't ask. There was a long silence. Then he said, well, we'll need to meet him. We'll need to plan something. Your mother will want to be involved in the wedding. There's nothing to be involved in. What does that mean? It means it's planned. It's in 3 weeks. I didn't invite you. He did not speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was quiet, and that was worse than the loud voice, because his quiet voice was the voice he used when he was about to take something from you. You will regret this, he said. Probably, I said, and I hung up. I did not regret it, not for 1 second. Not then, not later, not now, sitting here telling you about it. The only thing I have ever regretted, in the whole long catalog of my life, was the part of me that kept trying. A week before the wedding, my brother showed up at the hospital. He waited in the lobby for 2 hours until I came down from a surgery. He was wearing the suit he always wears when he wants to look like a serious person, the gray one. He stood up when he saw me and tried to hug me, and I stepped back. Talk to me, he said. Please. 5 minutes. I had 5 minutes. I had eaten lunch in the elevator and I had an angioplasty at 4. I led him to the bench outside the cafeteria. I sat down. I did not speak. You're really not inviting them. No. They're your parents. I know who they are. Mom is destroyed. Dad is angry, but Mom is destroyed. She cries every night. I looked at him for a long time. He had been my baby brother once. I had taught him to tie his shoes. I had sat on the floor of his bedroom and showed him how to make bunny ears with the laces, and when he finally got it right, he had hugged me so hard he almost knocked us both over. I tried to find that boy in his face now, and I couldn't. Why are you here? I said. Really, he looked at his hands. He had our father's hands, wide, with thick fingers. The kind of hands that look like they should be good at something physical, but my brother had never been good at anything physical, including being held. My fiancé's family, he said. They've heard things. About you, about the engagement and the wedding and everything. People are talking. Her father asked me last weekend what was going on with my sister. He'd seen the journal cover. He recognized the name. Ah, it looks bad for me, for us. For the wedding. Ah, if you could just come to one thing, one dinner, with Mom and Dad, so I could tell her family it's all been a misunderstanding, that we've worked it out. No. Just one dinner? No. You're being so... He stopped. He had been about to say selfish, and somewhere in his throat he had remembered that the last time he called me selfish, I was 22, and had refused to lend him money. I didn't have, and he had said it in front of our parents, and they had agreed with him, and I had not spoken at a family dinner for 3 months afterward. He remembered. I saw him remember. You weren't at my engagement, I said. You're not engaged. Wait, that came out wrong. I tried again. I wasn't at your engagement. You knew I wasn't invited. You let them not invite me. You stood at the head of that table with our father smiling at you, and you let them erase me, and now you're here because the woman you love has a family who actually pays attention and they noticed. He didn't answer. That's not my problem, I said. That's the problem you made. She's going to leave me, he said quietly. If this isn't fixed, her family, they're very particular about these things. I felt something move through me that I want to describe carefully because it was not pity, exactly, and it was not satisfaction, exactly. It was the strange grief of looking at someone you used to love and realizing the version of them you loved was a person you had invented to survive your childhood. The real him was sitting in front of me asking me to bleed for him one more time. Then she's going to leave you, I said. I stood up. I have a 4 o'clock. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard. Just enough, please. I looked down at his hand on my wrist. I looked back at his face. I said very softly, let go of me. He let go of me. he let go. I went upstairs and I did the angioplasty and the patient did well, and at 7 o'clock, I drove home and I sat on the kitchen floor and my fiancé sat down next to me and I told him everything and he said only, "I'm sorry, baby." That's it. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't try to give me a lesson. He just sat next to me on the kitchen floor for a long time until my back stopped aching and we went upstairs and went to sleep. The wedding was small and the wedding was perfect and the wedding had nothing to do with any of this. I want to say that because so many of these stories end with the wedding being a kind of weapon, a spectacle, a revenge served at high volume. Mine wasn't. The wedding was 42 people in a lodge in the woods. My grandmother walked me down the aisle. She was 86 and she used a cane, and she went very slowly, and the whole room waited for her, and nobody minded. The flowers were wild flowers my best friend had picked from a field that morning. We had a string quartet because my fiancé's mother insisted. We ate dinner family style at long tables with checkered cloths. We danced in a barn with the doors open to the September air. My grandmother fell asleep in a chair around 10 and her great-grandson, the toddler, fell asleep in her lap and someone took a picture of them and that picture is on my refrigerator now. My parents were not there. My brother was not there. The woman my brother was engaged to was not there. I did not think about them once during the ceremony. I thought about them twice during the reception and both times only briefly, and both times the thought was something like, the way you notice you stopped having a headache. It rained that night after we had gone to bed and I woke up and listened to it on the roof. And my husband, the word still felt new in my mouth, was asleep next to me. And I thought about the kitchen with the eggs and the spatula and the ring in his pajama pocket. And I thought about my 15th birthday when my parents had forgotten and my brother had spent his allowance on a slice of grocery store cake and put a candle in it and brought it to my room and sung to me by himself. And I thought, that boy is gone. And it is okay that he is gone. Because I am not gone. Here is the part nobody writes about because it isn't satisfying enough. My family did not call me to apologize. They did not appear at my door in tears. There was no cinematic moment of reckoning. Nothing collapsed. My father did not lose his job. My mother did not fall ill. My brother's engagement, as far as I know, did not break off. Although I heard, through my cousin, that her family had been very cool at the wedding, and that the two families did not sit together at the rehearsal dinner. That was the closest thing to a consequence I ever heard about. What happened instead is that they got smaller. Not in the world, just in me. For the first month after my wedding, I thought about them every day. By the 3rd month, every few days. By the 6th month, only on Sundays, because Sundays were the day my mother used to call. By the end of the 1st year, they had become something like a song I used to know all the words to and no longer did. I would remember the chorus sometimes. I would not miss the song. My grandmother died last spring. She was the only one I told. I drove out to her nursing home the weekend before my wedding and sat with her in the sunroom and held her hand and told her everything. The engagement party I wasn't invited to. The phone call. The brother in the suit. The lodge in the Berkshires. She listened the way she always listened, which was completely, without interrupting, her eyes on my face. When I was done, she said, "Your mother was never a kind girl. I have been waiting 40 years for someone to tell her no." I started crying. She held my hand tighter. She said, "Don't you cry. You're the one who got out." When she died, my mother called me. It was the first time we had spoken in 14 months. She said, "Will you come to the funeral?" And I said, yes, and I went, and I sat in the back row in a black dress and my husband sat next to me holding my hand, and after the service my mother came over and looked at me for a long time and said, "You look well," and I said, "Thank you," and she walked away. That was the last conversation I had with my mother. That was 2 years ago. I am 34 now. I am still a cardiac surgeon. My husband and I have a daughter who is 14 months old and who has my husband's eyes and my grandmother's stubborn chin. We named her after my grandmother, although we call her by her middle name because the first name is too big and old-fashioned for someone with 3 teeth. I am writing this telling you this because there is a comment I see a lot under stories like mine that says, "Why didn't you just block them sooner?" And I want to answer that because the answer is the whole story. I didn't block them sooner because I was hoping. Hope is the thing that keeps you on the phone. Hope is the thing that makes you drive to the house. Hope is the thing that makes you stand in the hallway of the hospital with your back against the wall and reread a text 6 times trying to find another meaning in it. Hope was the slowest thing in me to die, and when it finally died, I was free. But I was not the same person who had loved them. I think a lot of people stay because they are still hoping. I think a lot of people leave because they finally stopped. There is no shortcut between those two states. You cannot rush hope into giving up. You can only wait for it to lay itself down. If you are listening to this and you are still hoping, I am not going to tell you to stop. I would not have listened to anyone who told me to stop. I will only tell you that on the other side of hope, when it finally goes, there is not the emptiness you are afraid of. There is a kitchen. There is a kettle whistling. There is someone scrambling eggs with the wrong spatula. There is a small person with 3 teeth pulling herself up on the leg of your chair. There is a song you used to know the words to, playing somewhere far away, and you do not need to sing along anymore. The phone is on the counter. It is not ringing. It is not rung in a long time. That is the part nobody tells you about. That is the part I am telling you now. If this story meant something to you, or if you've lived your own version of it, I would love to hear it in the comments. I read them. I always read them. And if you've ever been told you were too much, or a lot, or the difficult one, I want you to know that those words almost always come from people who could not hold you and decided to call you heavy instead. Don't believe them. Find your kitchen. Find your eggs. Find your 42 people in a barn. And when the phone stops ringing, sit with the silence for a minute and then go live the rest of your life, like the video if it spoke to you. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. There are more of us than you think. I think about that hallway sometimes. The one outside OR4, where I slid down the wall with the cold coffee in my hand and read my cousin Marina's text 6 times. I think about the girl I was in that hallway, and I think about the woman who walked out of the lodge in the Berkshires 3 months later. And I want to tell you something I have figured out in the years since, because I think it matters. Nothing in my life changed because my parents got smaller. They got smaller because I changed. That is the order of it. I used to have it backwards. I used to think that if I could just become the right kind of daughter, the kind who didn't ask too many questions, the kind who didn't take up too much room at the table, the kind who said yes when they meant no and laughed when they were hurt, then one day, my parents would finally see me. I waited 31 years for that day. It was never going to come because they were not looking. The eyes that don't look at you when you are 7 do not suddenly learn to see you when you are 30. What I learned is that the people who tell you who you are have a stake in keeping you that person. My father needed me to be difficult, because if I was difficult, his coldness was justified. My mother needed me to be too much because if I was too much, her preference for my brother Theo was reasonable. The labels were not descriptions. The labels were jobs. They were jobs I had been given as a child, and I had been doing them faithfully for 3 decades. And the moment I set them down, the whole machinery of my family stopped working. That is not magic. That is just what happens when you stop being a part you were hired to play. I want to say something about strength, because I think people misunderstand it. I used to think strength meant being able to take more, to absorb more, to stay in the room when the room was hurting you. That is not strength. That is endurance. And endurance is what you do when you have not yet figured out how to leave. Strength is the slow, unromantic work of building a life that does not need their approval to stand up in the morning. Strength is the kitchen and the eggs. Strength is 42 people in a barn. Strength is choosing, every day, the people who actually answer when you call. If you are still hoping, I am not going to rush you. Hope dies on its own schedule, and you cannot speed it up. And anyone who tells you to just cut them off has forgotten what it felt like to still be loving someone who could not love you back. But I will tell you this. The day my hope finally laid itself down, I did not feel emptiness. I felt the first quiet I had ever known. And in that quiet, I could hear my own voice for the first time in my life. And what it said, very softly, was, "You were never the difficult one. You were the only one telling the truth." That is what I want to leave you with. Not advice, just that.